I was sitting alone at a table waiting for someone who never showed up. Then the woman next to me looked over and said something I'll never forget. I didn't know it then, but that single moment would change everything. Sometimes life starts moving in the right direction only after someone doesn't show up. Hello, you're watching Trelene, real stories with real twists. Let's get started. I'm Keith. I'm 29, live in a one-bedroom apartment just outside of Portland, Oregon, and work in marketing for a small logistics company. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills and keeps me busy enough to feel like I'm moving forward. Most of my friends are married or chasing something big. Me, I'm just trying to find someone who actually shows up when they say they will. A few weeks ago, I met Hazel online. She was 30 sharp, confident, and had this calm way of texting that made everything feel stable. We talked for hours about movies, travel, and the way both of us secretly hated networking events. After a string of empty conversations with people who seemed half present, she felt different. So when she agreed to meet me for dinner, I was honestly excited. I got to the restaurant 15 minutes early. I'd picked a small place downtown, one of those cozy spots with dim lights and quiet music. The kind of place where you can actually hear each other talk. I ordered a coffee while waiting, checked the menu, and glanced at the door every time it opened. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then 45. I texted her, "Hey, everything okay?" No reply. The waiter came by twice to ask if I wanted to order. I said I'd wait a little longer. My coffee had gone cold by the time I finally gave up and ordered dinner anyway just to have something to do. That's when I noticed her, the woman sitting one table away. She had brown hair tied up loosely, big headphones around her neck, and a laptop covered in stickers. She looked up from her screen, caught me staring at my phone, and smiled. "You look like you could use some company," she said. I chuckled nervously. "Guess it's that obvious?" She nodded. "Mind if I keep you company?" I hesitated for a second, then shrugged. "Sure, why not?" She closed her laptop, slid into the seat across from me, and extended her hand. "Melissa, Keith," I said. "Well, Keith," she smiled, "either you just got stood up or you're really bad at hiding your disappointment." I laughed for the first time that evening. Something about her tone made it impossible to feel sorry for myself. She ordered fries and joked that they'd be our recovery food. We talked about random things. Her work as a freelance designer, my job, our favorite places in the city. She was open, funny, unfiltered. Every once in a while, she'd glance at my phone lighting up on the table and say, "Still no message." I'd shake my head, and she'd just smirk like she already knew the answer. By the time we finished eating, 2 hours had passed. I didn't even notice the time. The waiter brought the check, and before I could grab it, Melissa slid it toward herself. "You can pay next time," she said with a playful grin. "Next time?" I asked. She scribbled something on the receipt, folded it, and pushed it across the table. "Next time, I'll be the one waiting." When I got outside, I unfolded it. Her handwriting was messy, but the message was clear. "Next time, I'll be the one waiting, M." I smiled to myself, tucked the note into my wallet, and walked toward my car. My phone buzzed again. Still no message from Hazel. That night, I realized something strange. The date I'd been waiting for never happened, but somehow I still ended up having one. I didn't plan on seeing Melissa again. Honestly, I thought what happened that night was just one of those random good moments you stumble into when life decides to cut you a break. But she'd written, "Next time, I'll be the one waiting." And for some reason, that line stuck in my head. It felt like an unfinished sentence. 2 days later, I walked past that same restaurant on my way home from work. I stopped, looked through the window, and almost laughed. There she was, same seat, laptop open, drink half finished, lost in her world again. Part of me thought it was a coincidence. Part of me wondered if maybe she knew I'd walk by. I hesitated outside for a good minute before going in. She looked up as soon as I approached and grinned. "You again? Guess I'm not the only one who keeps coming back here." Maybe I was just hungry, I said, trying not to sound too eager. Melissa raised an eyebrow. "Or maybe you were hoping to get stood up again. Worked out pretty well last time." That line broke the ice completely. She closed her laptop and motioned for me to sit down. "All right then, marketing guy, tell me something interesting about your job. And don't say nothing." I laughed and told her how half of my work was trying to convince clients they needed campaigns they didn't even understand. She laughed too, then told me about freelancing, the struggle of chasing invoices, getting ghosted by clients, and finding inspiration at 2 a.m. over cold pizza. We clicked without even trying. There was no pressure, no flirting agenda, just two people talking like they'd known each other for years. She didn't try to fill every silence. When she listened, she actually listened. And when she talked, I forgot about everything else. At one point, she caught me checking my phone. "Still no message?" she asked. I nodded. "Nothing." She tilted her head. Whoever she is, she made a mistake. I froze for a second, then looked down at my cup. Those words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were sweet, but because they were true. I didn't even realize how much I needed someone to say that out loud. After dinner, we walked a few blocks toward the park. The city was quiet that night, street lights flickering on the wet pavement. She told me she'd moved to Portland 3 years ago after breaking off an engagement. Didn't want to get stuck somewhere I didn't belong, she said. I told her how I'd spent the past few years trying to build a stable life. Good job, decent apartment, enough savings for a vacation once a year, but somehow still felt like I was missing something. She looked at me and said, "Maybe stability isn't everything. Maybe you just need to feel alive again." It wasn't romantic, at least not yet, but it was real. When we reached the end of the street, she turned toward me. "Same time next week." I hesitated. "You mean here?" "Unless you've got another date lined up," she teased. I smiled. "No, not anymore." She reached into her bag, pulled out a pen, and wrote her number on a napkin. "There now, you don't have to wait for someone who doesn't show up." When she walked away, I stood there for a while, holding that napkin like it meant more than it should. I didn't text her right away. I wanted to, but something inside me said not to rush it. That night, Hazel still hadn't written back. Her silence didn't sting anymore. It just faded like something that had already ended, even if no one said it out loud. The next morning, I found the note from Melissa still in my wallet. The words looked different now. "Next time, I'll be the one waiting." It didn't sound like a joke anymore. It sounded like a promise. For the first time in a long while, I woke up looking forward to something. Not a message, not a date, not even an explanation. Just another conversation with someone who made me forget why I was waiting in the first place. I didn't know it yet, but that dinner, the one that wasn't supposed to happen, would be the start of everything that changed my life. It had been almost a week since that second dinner with Melissa. Life went back to its usual rhythm. Work, gym, late-night emails. Except now there was this undercurrent of curiosity running through everything I did. Every time my phone buzzed, a part of me hoped it was her. We hadn't texted since that night. I didn't want to seem overeager, and she seemed like the kind of woman who didn't chase or wait either. There was something balanced about that, something unspoken that made me respect her even more. Then one morning, right before heading into a meeting, I saw her name light up on my screen. Melissa, coffee later. Same place. It was short, simple, confident. I stared at it for a few seconds before typing back. "You read my mind." That evening we met again. She was already there, sitting by the window with her sleeves rolled up and a book in hand. She didn't stand when I came in, just looked up and smiled like we'd known each other for years. "You're late," she said. By 2 minutes, I laughed. She closed the book. "Still late." That's how she was. Playful, teasing, but never mean. We spent hours talking again. She told me about a client who wanted her to design a logo that felt like happiness but looked like sadness. I told her about my boss who scheduled meetings just to hear himself talk. It was the kind of easy back and forth that made time slip away unnoticed. At one point, she said, "You know what's funny? I can tell you actually listen. Most people don't." I asked, "They hear, but they don't listen," she replied. Something about that stayed with me. The way she said it, like she'd been through a lot more than she let on. Later that night, back home, I tossed my jacket on the chair, checked my phone out of habit, and froze. Hazel, her name. After 2 full weeks. Sorry, something came up. That was it for words. No explanation, no apology, just a message like nothing had happened. I stared at it, reading it over and over. I wanted to feel angry, but mostly I just felt done. Whatever spark we'd had before was gone, smothered under the weight of her silence. For a moment, I thought about replying, something short, polite, but my thumb hovered over the keyboard and stopped. There was no point. I deleted the chat and went to bed. The next day, I ran into Melissa completely by accident. It was raining hard and I ducked into a coffee shop a few blocks from my office. She was there in line wearing a gray hoodie and holding 2 cups. When she saw me, she grinned and, "You following me now?" "Only on Tuesdays," I said. And apparently in the rain, she handed me one of the cups. Good timing. I ordered 2 by mistake. Or maybe not by mistake. We found a corner table, both dripping wet, laughing like kids caught skipping work. She talked about growing up in Michigan, how she missed thunderstorms because the air smelled different there. I told her about my dad teaching me how to drive on an empty highway at dawn. Somewhere between stories, she asked, "So, did she ever text you for a second?" I didn't want to answer, but lying to Melissa felt impossible. "Yeah," I said finally. "Last night, just a quick sorry." She stirred her coffee slowly and nothing. I didn't answer. She nodded, her expression unreadable, then smiled faintly. Good. There was no judgment, no pity in her voice, just quiet approval, the kind that doesn't need to be explained. We sat there for hours. The rain stopped, but neither of us wanted to leave. When the barista announced closing time, she looked at me and said, "You ever think maybe you were supposed to get stood up that night?" I laughed. "Supposed to?" "Yeah, like if she hadn't done that, we'd never be sitting here right now." That line lingered in the air. I didn't have an answer, and she didn't need one. Outside, the pavement glistened with reflections from the streetlights. She walked beside me, our shoulders brushing now and then. At the corner, she stopped and said, "All right, Destiny's overworked. I'll walk from here." I smiled. "You sure?" "Yeah," she said, tightening her jacket. "But text me when you get home, just so I know Destiny didn't mess up the rest of your night." When I got back to my apartment, I looked at my phone and saw her message already waiting. "Melissa made it home yet?" I replied, "Just did. Thanks for the coffee." Her answer came instantly. "Next time you're buying." For the first time in months, I felt something real. Not the excitement of infatuation, not the emptiness of chasing someone who didn't care, just warmth. I didn't know what it was becoming, but it felt right. And as I fell asleep, I realized how strange life could be. How sometimes you have to be left waiting at the wrong table to end up sitting at the right one. It was a Saturday morning when Hazel's name appeared on my phone again. This time, the message was longer. "Can we talk? I owe you an explanation." For a few seconds, I just stared at it. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part, the one that still remembered our late-night talks and the way she made me feel understood, wanted to hear her out. Curiosity has a way of disguising itself as closure. I texted back, "Sure. When and where?" We met that afternoon at a quiet coffee shop near the river. She looked different, tired, maybe even a little broken. As soon as I sat down, she sighed, "I'm sorry, Keith. I should have told you what was going on. My ex-husband came back into the picture. I didn't plan it. I just froze." I listened without interrupting. She went on explaining how things had gotten complicated, how she thought she was ready to move on, but wasn't. Her words sounded honest, but they also felt detached, like she was confessing to a stranger. When she finished, she looked at me as if expecting forgiveness. "You didn't deserve to be left waiting," she said softly. I nodded. "You're right, I didn't." We sat in silence for a while. I could feel her searching for something to say that would make it right. But there wasn't anything left to say. Whatever had existed between us had already dissolved the night. She didn't show up. When I left, she stood up as if to hug me, but I stepped back and offered a polite smile instead. "Take care of yourself, Hazel." Outside, the air was cool and sharp. I walked along the river, phone buzzing in my pocket, but I didn't look at it until I reached the bridge. It was a message from Melissa. "Melissa, want to help me pick out a new lamp? Mine died dramatically this morning." I smiled. Somehow her timing was always uncanny. Half an hour later, I was at her apartment, small, bright, filled with plants and the smell of fresh coffee. She was barefoot, sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by catalogs. "You made it," she said. "The fallen lamp would thank you, but it's in the trash." I laughed and sat beside her. "Tragic. What happened?" It flickered once, buzzed, and went out. Kind of symbolic, actually. "Of what?" She looked at me for a moment, of letting go of things that stopped working. It hit me harder than I expected. She didn't know. I'd just seen Hazel. Or maybe she did. Somehow, Melissa always sensed things without being told. After a while, we went to a small store downtown to look for a replacement. She picked up one lamp after another, judging them like she was casting for a role. I teased her for being indecisive, and she rolled her eyes. "I'm not indecisive," she said. "I just care about the light I live with." We both froze for a second. There was something in that line that went deeper than lamps. Back at her place, she made tea, and we ended up sitting by the window watching the rain start again. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was full of small things that didn't need to be said. Then I told her about Hazel, about the message, the meeting, the explanation, every detail. I didn't want secrets between us. Melissa listened quietly, her hands wrapped around her mug. When I finished, she took a long breath. "I'm glad you told me," she said finally. "I don't want to be someone's rebound, Keith, but I also don't want to walk away from something real." Her honesty left me speechless. I hadn't realized until that moment how much I needed that kind of clarity. Simple, direct truth without games or guilt. "I don't know what this is yet," I admitted, "but I want to find out, and I wanted to start clean. No ghosts hanging around." Melissa smiled faintly. "Then let's start there." The rest of the evening was quiet. We didn't talk about Hazel again. We didn't define anything, but something shifted. There was an understanding, that fragile, powerful kind that doesn't need promises, just presents. When I was leaving, she walked me to the door. "You know," she said softly, "sometimes people show up in our lives to teach us what not to settle for." I nodded. "And sometimes they make room for someone who actually shows up." She smiled. "Exactly." Outside, the rain had stopped. I stood by my car for a moment, watching her silhouette through the window, moving around her small, messy apartment. For the first time in years, I felt calm, not excited, not nervous, just right. That night, lying in bed, I thought about the strange symmetry of it all. Hazel's absence had led me to Melissa's presence. Two women, two choices, two different kinds of truth. One was about holding on, the other about moving forward. And maybe that's what life really is. Learning to tell the difference between the people who return and the ones who arrive. 3 months later, life felt different. Not dramatic, not movie perfect, just quietly, beautifully different. My days had rhythm again. I still worked the same marketing job, still took the same route to the office, still brewed the same cheap coffee every morning. But everything in between felt new because Melissa had become part of it. We never had some big defining talk. It just happened naturally. One weekend turned into another, dinners into late night talks, and jokes into something more. She started leaving her jacket on the back of my chair, her favorite mug in my kitchen, her playlists in my car. Every small trace of her felt right, like my life had finally filled in the missing pieces I didn't know were missing. One Friday evening, she called and said, "I've got a surprise, meet me at our place." I knew exactly which one she meant, the little restaurant downtown where all of this had started. When I walked in, she was sitting at the same table, that familiar half smile on her face. The waiter recognized me and grinned like he'd been waiting for this moment too. "Back to where it all began?" he asked. I nodded. "Looks like it." Melissa looked up from her menu and said, "You still check your phone too much?" I laughed. "Not anymore." She raised an eyebrow. "No one to wait for?" "No," I said. She showed up. Her smile softened. Good answer. Dinner felt effortless as always. We talked about our week, about how one of her clients wanted a logo that smelled like optimism, about how my office printer had finally died after months of threatening to. It was normal, but there was something quietly sacred about it. Two people who met by accident, sitting at the same table where it all began, now completely comfortable in each other's silence. Halfway through the meal, Melissa leaned back and said, "You know, I wasn't supposed to be there that night." "What do you mean?" "I'd had a rough week. I told myself I'd just grab a coffee, maybe get some work done, and go home. Then I saw you sitting there looking like someone who'd just lost a bet with life. I almost didn't say anything." "But you did," I said. She nodded. "Yeah, Something told me to. I looked at her, at the way she smiled without forcing it, at how easily she filled every space around her with calm. Well, you definitely changed my luck, I said. She laughed. No, you just stopped waiting for the wrong person. That line stuck with me for a while. Maybe that was what this whole story had been about. Not just love, but timing. The way one small decision can redirect an entire life. After dinner, we walked out into the cool night air. Downtown lights shimmered in the puddles left by a recent rain, and the streets hummed with quiet traffic. She slipped her hand into mine like she'd done it 1,000 times. We stopped by the same bench near the corner where we'd said goodbye that first night months ago. Melissa looked up at me and said, "Funny how one person not showing up led to the best night of my life." I smiled, feeling that same warmth spread through me that I'd felt the first night as she spoke to me. You know, I said, I used to think that night was just bad luck. Now I think it was the best thing that ever happened to me. She tilted her head. So you're saying destiny knows what it's doing? Maybe destiny's just bad at scheduling. I joked. But yeah, I think I got this one right. She laughed and the sound of it felt like home. Later that night, back at my apartment, she curled up next to me on the couch, sketching something on her tablet while I worked on a project. At one point, she glanced up and said, "You ever think about how weird life is? How a missed call, a late text, or a no-show can change everything?" "Every day," I said. She smiled. "Good. Don't forget that." I watched her for a moment, the concentration on her face, the quiet hum she made when she was focused. There wasn't any big revelation, no sudden rush of emotion, just the steady realization that this right here was what I'd been waiting for without even knowing it. Before bed, I checked my phone. There was a message from Hazel from weeks ago, still sitting unread in my archive. I finally deleted it, not out of anger, not out of spite, just peace. That chapter was closed. The next morning, Melissa and I went for a walk downtown. As we passed the restaurant, she stopped and said, "You realize this is technically our anniversary? Is it 3 months since you got stood up?" She said, grinning. "Then I guess I owe Hazel a thank you." I replied. Melissa laughed. "Maybe send flowers." We both knew I never would. We walked on side by side, sunlight cutting through the spaces between buildings. Everything felt ordinary in the best possible way. That evening, sitting at home, I thought back to that night I waited alone, watching the door open again and again for someone who never came. I remembered the cold coffee, the growing frustration, the weight of disappointment. And then I thought of the moment Melissa looked up and said, "Mind if I keep you company?" It was strange how one simple question had rewritten everything. I looked into the camera, or maybe just into that invisible space where stories end and real life begins, and said quietly, "She didn't show up, but the right person did, and that was the truth." Sometimes the universe ghosts you on purpose, leaving an empty chair so the right soul can slide in unannounced and rewrite your story. Keith's night of waiting for Hazel, who vanished without a word, felt like rock bottom until Melissa's casual "mind if I keep you company?" turned disappointment into destiny. One no-show cracked open space for effortless laughter, napkin phone numbers, and the quiet magic of someone who listens without fixing, teases without wounding, and shows up simply because she wants to. The ache isn't in the rejection. It's in realizing how long we settle for almost, chasing ghosts while the real thing sits one table over, waiting for us to notice. This story whispers through tears and goosebumps. Let go of the people who leave you checking your phone. Embrace the ones who hand you fries and a future. Love isn't always fireworks. It's the soft click when the door you didn't know was open finally swings wide. What's your beautiful accident born from someone else's absence? Spill every detail in the comments. Your twist might be someone else's lifeline. And if Keith and Melissa's serendipity stole your breath, smash subscribe and ring the bell. Trelene delivers raw, heart-pounding, real-life turns every week because your next beginning could be one empty seat away.